On Kauai Island, precisely at the villa owned by the TBM group, two villa guards were seen relaxing and talking about things as usual, but suddenly they heard a shout from the other direction. They saw a large amount of money being spread around, and other officers also caught the money, seeing the rope relic along with the worm relic spreading money from a bag full of money. Seeing that the two guards still did not know what happened and why they were crowding the money, but one of the people who had gotten a lot of money invited the two guards to join them. The two guards looked at each other, and with enthusiasm they trained to catch the money that was spread, seeing the rope relic that seemed to lead them away from the villa with the money. Meanwhile, Seo Joo-Heon, who received a report if the mission to attract the guards' attention was successful, smiled happily because now the TBM villa was completely empty, and told Oh Seung-woo to approach Seo Joo-Heon after finishing with the problem of emptying the villa. Seo Joo-Heon also made sure if the work done by Yoo Ji-ha was completed as well. After hearing everything was done, Seo Joo-Heon released the relic Nero. Nero spoke and began to fly to rebuild his palace, but Nero wanted the visitors to see their competition, because now the surroundings were completely empty. But Seo Joo-Heon asked Nero not to worry because he had brought his visitors. Upon hearing that, Nero excitedly rebuilt his palace, and instantly a huge explosion occurred. Even the light soared into the sky. The TBM villa slowly began to collapse, replaced by Nero's palace built on top of it. Also seen some ancient Roman architecture began to build, and the previous theater was rebuilt. Yoo Ji-ha looked in awe as the tomb that used to be in Kyoto was now recreated in front of his eyes, and Yoo Ji-ha could also see some statues of Nero that were not there before when they were in the tomb in Kyoto. Nero also changed his form back to human with flames burning behind him. After that, a notification window appeared saying that the tomb had reformed, and now Seo Joo-Heon and Yoo Ji-ha were trapped in the tomb. Seeing such a magnificent stage like this, Seo Joo-Heon called out to his visitors, the relics who had gathered to see the competition between Seo Joo-Heon and Nero. Yoo Ji-ha, who saw so many relics, was amazed by it. Seo Joo-Heon said that these relics were his invited guests, that he asked the worm relic to gather them. The relics were seen booing Seo Joo-Heon, who was going to compete with Nero at this time. Yoo Ji-ha heard that the relics were not supporters of Seo Joo-Heon, but just relics who hated Seo Joo-Heon. Nero seemed happy to see the relics that had gathered on his theater. Nero called Seo Joo-Heon and prepared to do his competition now. Meanwhile, with CEO Kwon, who still didn't know anything about his destroyed village, still sitting casually in his chair, before the voice of Yoon Si-woo came to disturb the tranquility in the room. Hearing the word disaster, CEO Kwon was immediately alerted. Then Yoon Si-woo also reported that the villa that CEO Kwon had was messed up because of the rise of a tomb with Roman architecture on top of CEO Kwon's villa. CEO Kwon seemed to be still digesting the situation, and he asked for the next report from Yoon Si-woo. Yoon Si-woo also said that there were no casualties from the tomb, but one of CEO Kwon's most expensive paintings had been burned by the fire. And not only that, Yoon Si-woo also reported other losses that managed to make CEO Kwon panic hearing it. CEO Kwon looked dizzy, but it seemed that Yoon Si-woo was not finished with his report, because he also said that he got contact from the Monaco royal family if they would stop exchanging their new products that were part of their collaboration with CEO Kwon. CEO Kwon was angry to hear that, while Yoon Si-woo became nervous to face the anger of CEO Kwon because he also did not know the reason why they cancelled their cooperation. Yoon Si-woo had made a call to the royal family of Monaco and wanted CEO Kwon to talk directly with them. CEO Kwon picked up the call and was seen on the other side of the phone, Sophia, who was talking to CEO Kwon now. Hearing that the princess of the Kingdom of Monaco is directly talking to him makes CEO Kwon surprised and tries to be as friendly as possible. but it seems that Sophia does not want to talk now because it can be seen that she is still wearing an angry expression. Sophia also began to discuss about the relic of Nero with CEO Kwon, which was responded well by him. But Sophia explained directly to the point why her relic was on the island owned by CEO Kwon now. CEO Kwon seemed surprised to hear that, but whatever happened to his village was not Sophia's business. Because seeing his relic on CEO Kwon's island, Sophia accused CEO Kwon of stealing his relic, but CEO Kwon, who knew nothing and was accused of stealing Sophia's relic, was upset now. But CEO Kwon still tried to calm down and explained that it was not him who stole Sophia's relic, and said that he was a victim in this case because his village was destroyed now. And Sophia also asked permission to check the village itself, and now he was on his way. CEO Kwon agreed and allowed Sophia to visit his island. After the phone was turned off, CEO Kwon was angry with Yoon Si-woo again because of what happened to his village and asked how his staff was doing there. Yoon Si-woo admitted that there were relic worms and ropes that spread money and attracted the staff's attention, and said that everything happened when the staff was leaving their respective positions. CEO Kwon was surprised and angry to hear that, but Yoon Si-woo said that he also did not know what really happened there. It was also seen that on the staff's social media there were several posts showing that they had earned a lot of money. And after CEO Kwon heard all the explanations, he thought if there was someone who was the culprit behind all this. CEO Kwon gasped when his head flashed someone who was very likely to do all this. And someone who was the culprit according to CEO Kwon assumptions was Seo Joo-Heon, who managed to take the relic Nero in Kyoto and sold it to the Princess of Monaco through an auction. What will CEO Kwon do after he finds out? And how will this problem be solved? Still with CEO Kwon blaming Seo Joo-Heon for the trouble he received, everything made sense if Seo Joo-Heon was the culprit of the destruction of his village and the disappearance of Sophia's relic. CEO Kwon was very angry at Seo Joo-Heon now for giving him a lot of trouble. CEO Kwon also asked Yoon Si-woo to get ready and go to Hawaii now. CEO Kwon was so angry now that he wanted to destroy Seo Joo-Heon right now. Meanwhile, in the place where Seo Joo-Heon is, there is a yellow glow that soars through the sky. Oh Seung-woo and his subordinates are still guided by the rope relic to meet Seo Joo-Heon in the tomb. And when they enter the theater, they see the relics that have gathered there and witness Seo Joo-Heon, who is together with Nero. Nero felt that this was the day he had been waiting for because Seo Joo-Heon had gotten him into trouble. But Seo Joo-Heon, who certainly didn't know what problem Nero was talking about, asked him. Nero explained that it was because of Seo Joo-Heon that his novel only sold as many copies, because Seo Joo-Heon published her novel, making Nero's novel unsellable. But Seo Joo-Heon denied it because she never intended to publish or even sell her novel. Seo Joo-Heon mocked Nero, who was only able to sell one copy, and she also assumed that Nero herself bought it. Nero considers himself a victim because since the appearance of Seo Joo-Heon's novel, everyone doesn't want to read it or even glance at it. Meanwhile, with the relics, they don't even know if Nero has written a novel. Nero is then surprised when he hears one of the relics remember the title of the novel he wrote. But as soon as Nero hears that the relics consider his novel as trash because it is not very good, he becomes upset and burns those who mock his novel. And with his anger, all those present there came under the power of Nero. And that place became a place where Nero became very favored, and all his wishes would happen when he wished. Nero became very angry now, and he released his fire as a form of threat so that the relics would shut up and become supportive of him, who would compete with Seo Joo-Heon. Yoo Ji-ha did not accept Nero's words, but now both Yoo Ji-ha and Seo Joo-Heon were unable to resist the power of Nero in his palace. There were several relics that were hot because of Nero's fire. Seo Joo-Heon, who saw everything, thought of how he would win if Nero unfairly ordered the relics to support him. Seo Joo-Heon then thought of what if he made Nero give up before he could compete, because Seo Joo-Heon himself was not sure if he would win even if he competed. Seo Joo-Heon called out to Nero and asked him to stop being angry and get on with the competition. Seo Joo-Heon asked Nero to show his novel to Seo Joo-Heon and the audience in the theater to compare it with Seo Joo-Heon's novel. Seo Joo-Heon again persuaded Nero to show his novel to him now that Nero had read Seo Joo-Heon's novel before. But the relics looked down on Seo Joo-Heon, who wanted to read Nero's novel written in the relic language, and started laughing and mocking Seo Joo-Heon. Nero also belittled and mocked Seo Joo-Heon because he thought Seo Joo-Heon would not be able to understand the language he used. But Seo Joo-Heon told Nero to shut up and handed over his novel. Nero confidently gave his novel to Seo Joo-Heon to read. Not only that, because of his arrogance, Nero said that he would kneel before Seo Joo-Heon if Seo Joo-Heon could read just one sentence from his novel. Seo Joo-Heon smiled because Nero had promised so. Seo Joo-Heon opened the novel and began to read it very smoothly. It suddenly made Nero surprised. Seo Joo-Heon continued sentence by sentence in the novel and read it smoothly without any difficulty. Not only Nero was surprised, but all the relics who were present as the audience. They were also surprised when Seo Joo-Heon could understand their language. All the relics there panicked because Seo Joo-Heon easily read and understood their language, and after that Seo Joo-Heon collected the promise of Nero who would kneel before him when Seo Joo-Heon managed to read the novel. But seeing Nero who did not want to kneel in front of him, Seo Joo-Heon approached Nero and began to compare Nero's novel and his own, which was far behind the novel that Seo Joo-Heon wrote. Seo Joo-Heon said seriously to Nero about his poor writing skills. Nero, who heard all that, was getting more and more insecure and anxious hearing the criticism from Seo Joo-Heon for his novel. Seo Joo-Heon, who saw Nero who was insecure and doubting himself, smiled because his plan succeeded. Although Nero was never good at any art, he was never blamed and blasphemed like this, because who would dare to blaspheme the Roman emperor in the past, and therefore Nero only ever heard the praise of his work even though it was not as good as he thought. And since Nero is now a relic with such a background, Seo Joo-Heon is sure that Nero would not have been able to withstand such harsh criticism as he did. Looking at him now, Seo Joo-Heon is sure that Nero has been mentally destroyed. Seo Joo-Heon also returned to his harsh criticism to Nero, which made him more insecure and hurt every time Seo Joo-Heon criticized him. Seo Joo-Heon opened his pen to correct the novel written by Nero. Nero did not accept it, but Seo Joo-Heon continued to change the title, and it made Nero angry because Seo Joo-Heon arbitrarily changed the title of the novel. But Nero's anger had to be restrained when he heard the relics began to praise Seo Joo-Heon for his extraordinary abilities and compared him to Nero. Seo Joo-Heon started to change some sentences in the novel to make it more interesting to read, and the positive responses from the relics made Nero even more anxious. Now, Seo Joo-Heon changed almost all the sentences in Nero's novel, and the relics' responses were even more interested in what Seo Joo-Heon wrote now. Meanwhile, Nero felt insecure because he saw the responses from the relics were much better to Seo Joo-Heon than to him. Yoo-Ji-ha, who saw Seo Joo-Heon repairing it with a bit of doubt and uncertainty on his face because he thought Seo Joo-Heon was a bit too much now. And sure enough, Nero, who couldn't accept that his novel didn't get a good reaction, started attacking the relic with his fire and made them say that his novel was better. It was seen that some of the novels there screamed in pain because they were hit by Nero's fire, but they still didn't want to admit it. Seo Joo-Heon and Yoo-Ji-ha were also affected by the attack made by Nero. Seo Joo-Heon then said to Nero that if he used his power to make people acknowledge him, then he was not worthy of being called an artist, and tore Nero's work in front of his face. Nero, who saw his work being torn apart just like that, his heart was broken because of what Seo Joo-Heon said, and because he was mentally broken. Nero lost his interest in writing works again. Seo Joo-Heon, who knew it, smiled at the sight of Nero, who was kneeling on the floor. Seo Joo-Heon thought of ending everything now. Seo Joo-Heon said another thing that made Nero's heart break even more and doubted him even more. Seo Joo-Heon wanted to show Nero something now, and when Nero saw what was written on the paper, Nero became surprised to see it and his eyes bulged in disbelief. Yoo-Ji-ha was curious what Seo Joo-Heon actually wrote to make Nero like that. Seo Joo-Heon smiled because he had written some of the most cruel and rude comments he had ever received in his life. Did Seo Joo-Heon manage to get the relic, Nero? What will happen now? Nero held the note given by Seo Joo-Heon earlier with a look of believing what he saw. Seo Joo-Heon explained about the hate speech to Nero. Seo Joo-Heon then knocked back Nero's mentality so that he was really down now. Nero didn't seem to want to believe what he read about the hate speech, and suddenly the fire in his palace went out and some black aura began to spread throughout the palace. The relics there panicked because of Nero's extinguished fire and the black aura. Nero has admitted his defeat now, and Seo Joo-Heon, who saw this opportunity, approached Nero and asked him to surrender quietly to Seo Joo-Heon. And Seo Joo-Heon also made an offer if maybe he would give some teachings to Nero if he surrendered to him now. Nero agreed to Seo Joo-Heon's offer, and slowly his body gave off a bright glow, and a tattoo of a crown appeared on Seo Joo-Heon's arm, indicating that Nero had made a contract with her now, and now Nero transformed himself back into a crown. Seo Joo-Heon, who saw the tattoo on her arm, became happy because finally Nero agreed to enter into a contract with her. And after that, several notification windows appeared saying that now Seo Joo-Heon could use Nero's power, and her dominance power increased. But when Seo Joo-Heon took the relic, he got new information about Seven Majesties' keys. Seo Joo-Heon assumed that this key would make him meet the Emperor of the Relics, and it seems that the relic obtained from the Seven Great Tombs is not just an ordinary relic but also a key to something. Seo Joo-Heon also glanced at the relics who were trying to leave because the competition was over. But Seo Joo-Heon did not let them leave just like that when the rope relic began to form itself like a net and caught all the relics that were there. There were some relics who rebelled because they were caught by the rope relic. The relics became unhappy with Seo Joo-Heon, who had caught them even though their duty as an audience had been completed. But Seo Joo-Heon told the relics to pay with themselves when they had watched the competition. The relic rebelled because they had paid the entrance fee before, but Seo Joo-Heon ignored them, and Yoo-Ji-ha, who saw that, just smiled at how cruel Seo Joo-Heon was to the relic. The relic wanted to be released immediately, and they also promised to pay the tax imposed by Seo Joo-Heon. But Seo Joo-Heon, who did not want money, now rejected the relic's proposal to pay it and would still take them all as payment. This net was obtained after Seo Joo-Heon told Yoo-Ji-ha to make a replica of the rope relic and tie them all until the relic could not escape even though they rebelled. However, it seems that one of the relics with treacherous there can tear the rope relic and make all the captured relics free. Seo Joo-Heon, who saw that, just looked at him with a troublesome look. Seo Joo-Heon also began to release his dominance power and made all the relics there become subject to him. Seo Joo-Heon further strengthened her dominance so that by now all the relics could no longer move their bodies under the power of Seo Joo-Heon. And because she saw the large number of relics, Seo Joo-Heon summoned the 3 dogs from ancient Egyptian mythology to help her. Once Seo Joo-Heon summoned the dogs, the relics came back hoping for the relic dogs to help them free them from the power of Seo Joo-Heon. Meanwhile, Anubis, who saw the situation now, did not understand what happened to the relics now. Seo Joo-Heon ordered the dogs to make the relics there obey him. The dogs seemed unwilling to do so as Set was lying on the floor because he was still in the stage of repairing himself. Seo Joo-Heon agreed with it and he told Anubis to do it because Anubis looked fine. Seeing the dog relic being ordered by Seo Joo-Heon made the relics their sneer at Anubis and other dogs. They also protested Anubis and other dogs who instead followed orders from Seo Joo-Heon instead of helping the relics now. Anubis, who did not want to be found out that they had submitted to Seo Joo-Heon, scolded the relics, while Seo Joo-Heon, who heard the title pin to Anubis and the other dogs, became a little more understanding if the relics had their own status. When one of the relics there asked the truth, in contrast to Anubis, who tried to cover up if they had been under control by Seo Joo-Heon, Set instead revealed it without guilt to the relics. But Anubis still wanted to maintain his pride and said that they followed Seo Joo-Heon because he was only interested in the abilities possessed by Seo Joo-Heon. Meanwhile, Seo Joo-Heon only looked at Anubis with a lazy gaze when Anubis called him a cultural asset for the relics. The relics also looked at each other at Anubis' words about Seo Joo-Heon. Meanwhile, Anubis, who doubted if they would believe, began to worry a little, and Set, who was lying on the floor, looked annoyed at Anubis, who gave them a ridiculous reason that could not be accepted. But the relics believed what Anubis said, making Anubis and even Set unable to believe that the stupid reason could be accepted by them. The relics thought that the dogs had read the novel by Seo Joo-Heon before, and they were a little hesitant when they accepted the fact of being fans of Seo Joo-Heon. But because Anubis and the other dogs had recognized the greatness of Seo Joo-Heon, they were happy. Seo Joo-Heon felt that things were getting weird. The relics accepted Seo Joo-Heon as their cultural asset and gave their power to Seo Joo-Heon. And a new notification window appeared in front of him that Seo Joo-Heon had become a cultural asset for the relics. And because of the many relics that became her fans, Seo Joo-Heon gained more glamour when she dealt with the relics later, and the relics decided themselves to follow Seo Joo-Heon as her fans. And thanks to Anubis, because Seo Joo-Heon was now recognized by the relics who became her fans, and Seo Joo-Heon kept them all inside the Van Gogh relic and closed the tomb because her business here was done very well. When the tomb slowly disappeared, Seo Joo-Heon could clearly see Seo Kwan's villa that was destroyed. Seo Joo-Heon smiled happily because he could destroy Seo Kwan's villa, and the person who owned the villa called Seo Joo-Heon angrily. Seeing Seo Kwan, who was angry at him, Seo Joo-Heon just smiled happily at him, and Seo Joo-Heon also said that everything happened by chance with a sly smile on his face. The angry Seo Kwan also ordered his subordinates to attack Seo Joo-Heon. Yoo Ji-ha panicked because he saw the number of people who would attack them now, but Seo Joo-Heon thought otherwise. Seo Joo-Heon just smiled happily and prepared to fight Seo Kwan's subordinates. Will Seo Joo-Heon be able to defeat them all? What will Seo Joo-Heon do to defeat them? Now seen, Seo Joo-Heon team is dealing with Seo Kwan subordinates. Also seen Seo Kwan, who is very angry now to Seo Joo-Heon. Seo Kwan ordered his subordinates to attack Seo Joo-Heon and his team. Seo Joo-Heon, who analyzed his opponent, now found a relic that caught his attention, namely Brutus' sword, a relic that can be used to destroy relics that have a higher rank than him. Besides that, the relic used by other subordinates is also a high-tier relic, and Seo Joo-Heon now has no relic that can fight them. Seo Joo-Heon suddenly changed his mind and it succeeded in making Yoo Ji-ha confused, and as usual Seo Joo-Heon, he suddenly ran away leaving Yoo Ji-ha and his subordinates behind. All his subordinates followed Seo Joo-Heon running, although they protested a little because Seo Joo-Heon suddenly ran away after challenging them. Seo Kwan's subordinates attacked Seo Joo-Heon and his subordinates, but when the relic was about to hit Seo Joo-Heon, suddenly the relic was stuck, and several other relics used to attack Seo Joo-Heon could not hit their targets properly. It made everyone confused. Seo Kwan was angry when he saw that his subordinates could not hit or even hurt Seo Joo-Heon, and shortly after that the relics held by Seo Kwan's subordinates rebelled and refused to attack Seo Joo-Heon because he was a cultural asset for the relics. Seeing the relics rebel made Seo Kwan's subordinates panic. Seo Kwan also told them to get rid of the rebellious relics and use other relics, while Seo Joo-Heon still did not think that being a cultural asset would really help him at a time like this. Then from inside Yoo Ji-ha's jacket, the relic asked to be taken out because they felt the owner was calling him. Yoo Ji-ha, who heard the relic making a mess in the Van Gogh painting, reported it to Seo Joo-Heon, and it seemed that the relic inside there was mixed with TBM's relic. Seo Joo-Heon also told the relic to calm down because now he was the owner of the relic. Meanwhile Seo Kwan, who knew that the relic was in the hands of Seo Joo-Heon, was angry because now Seo Joo-Heon was acting arbitrarily towards some of the relics belonging to Seo Kwan. He also ordered his subordinates to use firearms to attack Seo Joo-Heon if the relic did not want to hear it. There were several gunshots coming from the guns of Seo Kwan's subordinates who attacked Seo Joo-Heon, but all the bullets were sucked into Van Gogh's relic. While they were still attacking each other, Seo Joo-Heon and Seo Kwan heard someone shouting to stop everything, and when they turned around, they saw Princess Sophia along with her bodyguards coming. Feeling that staying here longer would not be beneficial for Seo Joo-Heon, she told Yoo Ji-ha to make an escape now, and when Yoo Ji-ha was done with his task, Seo Joo-Heon smiled and threw the Nero relic to Seo Kwan, and Seo Kwan caught the relic thrown by Seo Joo-Heon. Seo Joo-Heon said that his business was now done here, and told Seo Kwan that their deal was done. After that Seo Joo-Heon walked away leaving Seo Kwan, who was still confused by what Seo Joo-Heon said to him. But it seemed that someone was very angry after he heard what Seo Joo-Heon had just said. That person was Sophia, who was angry at Seo Kwan because it turned out that Seo Kwan had made an agreement with Seo Joo-Heon before. Sophia also scolded Seo Kwan, who turned out to be the mastermind behind the loss of his relic. But Seo Kwan tried to defend himself and said if all this was the fault of Seo Joo-Heon, and just when Seo Kwan was looking for Seo Joo-Heon, he saw that Seo Joo-Heon was on top of his teleportation place to escape, and after Seo Joo-Heon disappeared from their sight, Seo Kwan was annoyed that Seo Joo-Heon again managed to escape after giving him a new problem. Sophia still asked for an explanation from Seo Kwan. But Seo Kwan tried to tell the truth, but Sophia did not believe Seo Joo-Heon's words. Meanwhile still around Hawaii, but this time in the villa owned by the Holton family, seen Seo Joo-Heon, who was relaxing enjoying the night sky with Yoo Ji-ha beside him. Seo Joo-Heon actually only escaped not far from the island owned by Seo Kwan. They only escaped right next to the island owned by Seo Kwan. Also seen Irene, who assured Seo Joo-Heon and Yoo Ji-ha if they were safe while here because of the strict supervision on the island owned by the Holton family. Irene also greeted Seo Joo-Heon, who she had not seen for a long time because Seo Joo-Heon was constantly preoccupied with her relic search. Seo Joo-Heon also replied to Irene kindly and said if everything was fine. Irene, who heard that, was very happy when she heard if Seo Joo-Heon was fine all this time. Seo Joo-Heon also accepted the invitation of Irene, who would soon prepare dinner for them all. Seo Joo-Heon now got up from her comfortable chair and said that she would concentrate a little, which made Yoo Ji-ha fail to catch the meaning of Seo Joo-Heon's words. Seo Joo-Heon also took her hearing device to eavesdrop. Yoo Ji-ha also asked who would be the target of Seo Joo-Heon this time. Previously, when he threw the relic Nero to CEO Kwon, he had installed a device that he would use to eavesdrop later. Although Seo Joo-Heon had eavesdropped on CEO Kwon now, but he did not hear anything other than CEO Kwon, who was angry with his subordinates. Unlike before when CEO Kwon talked to Sophia, at that time CEO Kwon tried to persuade and convince Sophia if he did not cooperate with Seo Joo-Heon. Then CEO Kwon also gave reasons why he had to be willing to destroy his own village just to steal the relic. Sophia began to believe what CEO Kwon told her. Sophia also asked the reason why CEO Kwon did not come to the auction house, even though their Seo Joo-Heon sold the relic of Julius Caesar. Hearing that, CEO Kwon just sighed and said the truth if the relic sold by Seo Joo-Heon was not the relic of Caesar. When CEO Kwon explained to Sophia that he could confirm that this relic was not a Caesar relic, but Sophia wanted CEO Kwon to prove his words, and Sophia was surprised when she came to the conclusion that CEO Kwon had held the Julius Caesar relic in his hand. CEO Kwon confirmed the assumption made by Sophia, while Seo Joo-Heon, who heard it, became surprised after he knew the truth. Seo Joo-Heon now knows that CEO Kwon has had the relic of Julius Caesar from the beginning, and that is the reason why CEO Kwon did not come to his auction house. Now, Seo Joo-Heon knows where the power of CEO Kwon, who has a very strong dominance power, comes from. Although Seo Joo-Heon has been trying hard to find out all this time, and now he got the information he wanted all this time very easily just by eavesdropping on CEO Kwon and Sophia's conversation, seeing this huge advantage. Now, Seo Joo-Heon knows that destroying CEO Kwon's villa is just the beginning for him to take revenge on CEO Kwon. What will Seo Joo-Heon do after he finds out the origin of CEO Kwon's power? The sun was shining brightly, seen still at the Holton family mansion. Some of Seo Joo-Heon's subordinates were vacationing on the beautiful white sand. Meanwhile, there were sounds of protest from Yoo Ji-ha, who was still working on repairing Seo Joo-Heon's relic. But Seo Joo-Heon rejected Yoo Ji-ha's proposal to play in front. Yoo Ji-ha is still mumbling about the beautiful sea in front of his eyes, but look at him now, who is still struggling with his relic. Seo Joo-Heon also asked Yoo Ji-ha to be quiet because all his words are disturbing Seo Joo-Heon. Seo Joo-Heon is writing down and sorting the relics he has so that he will be easier to use the relics later on. Seo Joo-Heon separated her numerous relics into several parts, namely relics that she would use, relics that would be destroyed, and good relics that she would later sell to Edward. Seo Joo-Heon also separated the relics that he could upgrade later, while still sorting his relics. Seo Joo-Heon found a necklace relic that he recognized, the relic Bai Hyung's old necklace. Seeing this relic, Seo Joo-Heon remembered something. Bai Hyung was once known as someone who was born from a spirit. He was also famous for his ability to control spirits since he was a child because of the strangeness of his family line. After knowing this ability, the king asked for a spirit who could help him in government. Bai Hyung then introduced the king to a spirit named Gildal. Gildal was one of the spirits owned by Seol-ah. But Bai Hyung was one of the people who could also control Gildal, and that was the reason why Gildal's attack did not work on Seo Joo-Heon at that time, because Seo Joo-Heon had a relic of Bai Hyung. Seo Joo-Heon felt that the relic did not have a special aura because the relic would only help if Seo Joo-Heon dealt with ghosts and spirits like Gildal. After knowing all that, Seo Joo-Heon threw the relic to Yoo-Ji-ha to be repaired. Yoo-Ji-ha did not accept because Seo Joo-Heon kept giving him extra work, but Seo Joo-Heon ignored the protests of Yoo-Ji-ha and made Yoo-Ji-ha upset. Seo Joo-Heon met Irene, who was watching a news on TV. Irene, who saw Seo Joo-Heon, greeted her and became happy when she saw that Seo Joo-Heon was resting. Irene asked Seo Joo-Heon to sit with her and watch the news on TV. The news was about the disappearance of officials in South Korea. Seo Joo-Heon, who heard the news, assumed that the second tomb of the 7 great tombs had opened. Irene was surprised to hear what Seo Joo-Heon said. Seo Joo-Heon also had an instinct that this time the tomb would be formed by the Cleopatra relic and would be the Tomb of Lust. The news was about the disappearance of officials in South Korea. Seo Joo-Heon, who heard the news, assumed that the second tomb of the 7 great tombs had opened. Irene was surprised to hear what Seo Joo-Heon said. Seo Joo-Heon also had an instinct that this time the tomb would be formed by the Cleopatra relic and would be the Tomb of Lust. Yoo-Ji-ha, who heard those words, immediately turned excited. Seo Joo-Heon understood why Yoo-Ji-ha was acting like that, but actually Cleopatra was not only famous for that. Cleopatra used to be a government of the Ptolemy dynasty, but during her reign there were many problems from within her country and from outside her country. Cleopatra also managed to seduce the person who was the source of Rome's power. After Caesar died by assassination, Cleopatra joined Antonius, but unfortunately Antonius collapsed because he lost the war. And after that, Egypt and Rome made Pamphylia. The relic Cleopatra was only interested in men who had power, and that's why many officials disappeared there. But Irene, who was still looking at the news, told Seo Joo-Heon if it was not only officials who disappeared, because some local residents were also rumored to have disappeared in South Korea. Irene also asked if this was a coincidence, or they were connected to each other. Seo Joo-Heon, who heard that, felt something was strange now and he had to check it out himself. Irene, who heard Seo Joo-Heon was going to Korea, became interested in going, but Seo Joo-Heon refused, and it managed to upset Irene. But Seo Joo-Heon had another reason why Irene was not allowed to go, which was because of the risk that would occur and the possibility that her risk would increase. Seo Joo-Heon said that this time the tomb would not be that dangerous and she would go alone this time. But Yoo-Ji-ha, who heard that, did not accept that Seo Joo-Heon would just leave her. But Seo Joo-Heon explained to Yoo-Ji-ha that if it continued like that, then Yoo-Ji-ha would end up going crazy when she entered the Tomb of Lust, and told Yoo-Ji-ha to stay and repair the relic. After saying all that, Seo Joo-Heon stayed a few days at the Holton family's villa before her departure alone to Korea. Earlier she had told Yoo-Ji-ha and his 3 subordinates to fly to New York because they would only be a nuisance in the tomb this time. Because without their control power and immunity, it would be very difficult for them to ward off the temptation of the Cleopatra relic. And Seo Joo-Heon left for Korea after a long time. And when she arrived in Korea, Seo Joo-Heon felt strange after she followed the energy of the relic. Seo Joo-Heon saw a lot of people there. This was not the month when everyone would be on holiday. Even the clothes they wore strange. Some were wearing office clothes, pajamas, and other clothes, and after further analysis Seo Joo-Heon knew that they had all been tapped by a relic, and it seemed that the missing people had been gathered on this mountain, but almost some of them were just ordinary people who might have been caught while exploring the mountain. Seo Joo-Heon sensed the strangeness now that the Cleopatra relic didn't attract this much attention. Seo Joo-Heon thought that this relic wasn't the Cleopatra relic, and right after that there was a sound from the relic followed by a huge earthquake with a shining light soaring into the sky. Seo Joo-Heon realized that this place had been surrounded by a barrage that caught them inside. And after hearing what the relic was talking about and the barrage it made, Seo Joo-Heon was sure that this time the tomb was not made by the Cleopatra relic. Who made the tomb? And why did he trap so many people inside? Now everyone has been trapped in the tomb and cannot get out no matter what until they complete the challenge that will be given. After following the energy of the relic, everyone has been trapped in the tomb. Seo Joo-Heon is sure that the relic deliberately led them all into this mountain to make it easier for the relic to trap everyone. Seo Joo-Heon heard the voice of the relic that did not allow them to leave and began to say the challenge that everyone there had to follow. Seo Joo-Heon also got a notification window in front of his eyes that said if everyone here had been affected by the effects of the relic, and Seo Joo-Heon's fertility had increased while everyone who was affected by the effects of the relic went crazy. Seeing that Seo Joo-Heon was shocked by what the relic wanted in this tomb, Seo Joo-Heon then looked around him, which was a lot of people falling into their own lust. And with this, Seo Joo-Heon could confirm that this relic was not the Cleopatra relic, and now saw women looking at Seo Joo-Heon with their lustful gazes. Seo Joo-Heon was surprised when someone was heard talking to her, and when she looked at the woman who wanted to catch her, Seo Joo-Heon hurriedly dodged. The women began to chase Seo Joo-Heon because the harem relic that Seo Joo-Heon had was active now. Seo Joo-Heon had no choice but to run away from the savage women who fell in their lust, and information about the tomb appeared in front of Seo Joo-Heon now. This tomb belonged to Bayan Kang-so, a man who had the greatest fertility in the world, and Ong Nyo, a woman who was very attractive in the world. Seo Joo-Heon was surprised when he saw that there were two relics in one tomb, but he still had to keep running because the women behind him were chasing him relentlessly. Not only that, the men there who were jealous because all the women's attention was diverted to Seo Joo-Heon also chased Seo Joo-Heon and wanted to kill him. Seo Joo-Heon, who saw the number of people chasing him increasing, did not know what to do anymore. Now, Seo Joo-Heon began to be surrounded by women who were in front of him. Seo Joo-Heon also turned his bow quickly and ran in an uncertain direction. Seo Joo-Heon felt anxious now because if he was caught, then he would certainly die. Seo Joo-Heon also saw a large tree that was quite tall, and without hesitation, Seo Joo-Heon climbed the tree to avoid the pursuit of the women and men below. Seo Joo-Heon, who managed to breathe a sigh of relief at the top of the tree, tried to think of another plan that he could do now. Seo Joo-Heon also recalled the story of Bayan Kang-so and Ong Nyo, who were the protagonists of a ballad entitled Guruji Pansori. Ong Nyo was known and labeled by her own villagers. If any man loved her, then she would be destined to die. But Bayan Kang-so, who was famous for her uselessness, met Ong Nyo. They both fell in love and got married at that time. However, Bayan Kang-so died shortly after and left Ong Nyo alone again. This story is famous for being very explicit and strange. Seo Joo-Heon is seen thinking, although the story is famous, but Seo Joo-Heon is not sure if the relic has tier S. Because to open the 7 tombs, a relic must be at least tier S to do so. Seo Joo-Heon felt strange when he knew that the relic from the story was a relic with tier S. Even though the story was famous and good, Seo Joo-Heon still didn't believe it. And when Seo Joo-Heon glanced down, he was surprised to see that the women were using an axe to cut down Seo Joo-Heon's tree. And at that exact moment, the rope relic came out and asked Seo Joo-Heon to hold on to it. Instantly, Seo Joo-Heon flew along with his rope relic and climbed out of the crowd. The rope relic was happy that Seo Joo-Heon praised him just now, but a warning appeared, and before Seo Joo-Heon had time to react, a lightning bolt appeared from nothing and struck him down. The rope relic quickly caught Seo Joo-Heon's body, and thanks to that, Seo Joo-Heon's body didn't hit the ground hard. Seo Joo-Heon, who was still in pain, tried to get up, but unfortunately the women found Seo Joo-Heon and caught her. The first woman with blonde hair crushed Seo Joo-Heon's body so that she couldn't move. Seo Joo-Heon could only surrender now seeing the blonde woman on top of her, and just before the woman could do anything to Seo Joo-Heon, the rope relic attacked the woman and made her move away from Seo Joo-Heon's body. The rope relic was seen tying up several women who were about to attack Seo Joo-Heon. Seeing this opportunity, Seo Joo-Heon ran away and told the rope relic to follow her when she was done with the women. As Seo Joo-Heon ran, the relic seemed to talk to her, and a pink aura was seen forming a vortex not far from where Seo Joo-Heon stood now. Seo Joo-Heon, who felt that the aura of this tomb was getting stronger, he assumed that the relic Ongnyo had evolved to be stronger now, and it seemed that this would not be an easy thing for Seo Joo-Heon now. Meanwhile, in Hawaii, still with the Holton family villa, Irene was seen watching TV news about a tomb that Seo Joo-Heon entered before. Hearing that this time, the tomb was stronger than the previous tomb made Irene a little worried. Irene's mother also asked Irene, who was worried, if it was really the tomb that Seo Joo-Heon entered before, and Irene confirmed it. Irene tried to cover her worries and said that everything would be fine with Seo Joo-Heon. But hearing the situation from the news on TV that was getting worse made Irene very worried now. In front of her was a relic of the Mayan Holy Book of the Wind, which Seo Joo-Heon handed over earlier to Irene in case something happened to Seo Joo-Heon. And because Irene was very worried about Seo Joo-Heon, she tried to activate the relic. The relic has the power to say what danger is experienced by someone whose user is targeted. Irene also gave the name Seo Joo-Heon and what danger happened to her. Immediately the relic worked the word Jeongjo written there, which means chastity. Will Seo Joo-Heon survive the tomb? What will Seo Joo-Heon do now? Meanwhile, in the area called Sikcho in South Korea, where the Tomb of Lust was located, there was someone who was happy because he had succeeded in doing something. That person was Yoo Ji-ha, who came to the tomb alone. Yoo Ji-ha ran deeper and deeper into the tomb area. Yoo Ji-ha was sure that he would find something fun here, but now around him there was no one. Yoo Ji-ha began to complain because all he saw was mountains and forests as far as his eyes could see. But now around him there was no one. Yoo Ji-ha began to complain because all he saw was mountains and forests as far as his eyes could see. Then Yoo Ji-ha also saw several men running, and Yoo Ji-ha also ran while asking where they were going. The man said if he was going to the place where the woman was, and ended with Yoo Ji-ha following them. But a voice was heard that made them all surprised to hear it, and after that the ground in front of them slowly cracked and a totem emerged from the ground. They were all confused by the appearance of the totem, and the angry totem relic used its power on the man there. Meanwhile, Yoo Ji-ha, who saw the man in front of him was hit by the attack, became worried, and the relic told the man in front of him to satisfy himself to Yoo Ji-ha. Yoo Ji-ha, who did not want that to happen, started running from the man's pursuit and shouted for help. Switching to Seo Joo-Heon, who had now managed to escape from the women who were chasing him earlier. Seo Joo-Heon felt the energy released by a relic, and as his feet stepped forward, Seo Joo-Heon saw an old Korean-style hut in front of him. Seo Joo-Heon entered the hut and she felt the presence of a person from inside the hut. Seo Joo-Heon was surprised when she knew that the silhouette of the person she saw was Seol-ah. Seol-ah looked at Seo Joo-Heon with an angry look for making her suffer all this time. Seol-ah also took out her relic, preparing to attack Seo Joo-Heon. Seo Joo-Heon, who saw that, just smiled calmly and ordered his rope relic to bind Seol-ah. The rope relic began to attack Seol-ah. But unfortunately, Seo, who had prepared to use his relic, and as soon as he threw his relic, the relic opened and caught the rope relic inside. After that, the cloth that caught it turned into a bag of Finn McCool's relic. Relic Finn McCool's pouch. Finn McCool was a gallant warrior in Irish mythology, and the valuables owned by someone in a mythology are as extraordinary as the person in the mythology. The relic has the power to capture and store anything in it. Seeing Seo smiling happily because she managed to catch the rope relic, seeing that Seo Joo-Heon approached Seo and began to attack her to take back the rope relic. But Seo, who has great skills in fighting, easily knocked Seo Joo-Heon down and slammed her to the floor. Seo also locked the movement of Seo Joo-Heon with her body, and it seemed that Seo was also affected by the relic. Seo Joo-Heon, who saw that, became shocked because Seo had fallen in lust because of the relic in this tomb. Seo began to use her knife to tear Seo Joo-Heon's clothes. Seo Joo-Heon, who saw that, could only surrender because of Seo's great strength. She could not do anything. Seo Joo-Heon, who knew that the relic Ong Nyan attached itself to Seo, tried to keep Seo away, who wanted to kiss her. But Seo Joo-Heon couldn't help it because Seo suddenly became very strong. But right before Seo managed to kiss Seo Joo-Heon, something stopped her and made Seo jerked backwards. Seo Joo-Heon got a window of notification that an unknown force made Seo fall backwards. Not wanting to miss this opportunity, Seo Joo-Heon lunged at Seo's body, and now she was the one who locked Seo's movements. But Seo rebelled and tried to keep Seo Joo-Heon away. With another plan, Seo Joo-Heon also said that she just wanted to switch positions and she was the one who would lead now. Hearing that, Seo calmed down and let Seo Joo-Heon lead, and when she felt that Seo fell into her trap and started to get distracted, Seo Joo-Heon's hands began to search for the whereabouts of the relic that had possessed Seo's body by looking for the aura released by the relic, and as soon as Seo Joo-Heon found it, he quickly took it from Seo's body and threw it away. But Seo Joo-Heon was surprised when he got an attack from the relic he took, and immediately the relic Ong Nyan appeared in front of his eyes, but the relic was only a relic with tier B. Seo Joo-Heon drew his sword to destroy the relic and close this tomb, but the relic Ong Nyan began to approach Seo Joo-Heon and wanted to control it. But Seo Joo-Heon, who was faster, managed to attack the relic before it got close. Seo Joo-Heon split the relic in half and the relic Ong Nyan cried out in pain. Meanwhile, Seo Joo-Heon couldn't believe how easy it was for him to attack the relic. The relic that guarded the 7 spears shouldn't be this easy to defeat. Seo Joo-Heon, who heard the relic protesting and was upset with him, asked the relic to open the entrance of this tomb and threatened that he would destroy the Bayan Kang So relic if the Ong Nyan relic did not follow his orders. But the relic was still annoying and said, underestimating the power of Seo Joo-Heon. Seo Joo-Heon also asked how to solve this tomb and also saw Seo who was starting to wake up. Seo Joo-Heon then threatened the relic with his sword and made the relic confess. Seo Joo-Heon needed to find the original owner of this tomb, and that way he could solve the tomb. Seo Joo-Heon was a little confused with what the original owner meant. But according to what he assumed before, if the relic Ong Nyan and Bayan Kang So were not the original owners of this tomb because their tier was so low to be a relic that made the 7 great tombs. How will Seo Joo-Heon find the original owner of this tomb? And what will Seo Joo-Heon do to relic Ong Nyan?